11 seconds remaining. One last rush perhaps for the Flyers. Giroux to Hartnell. To Giroux. Giroux holds all the way across. Pucker scores! 2.1 seconds remaining, and the Flyers are on top.
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah, and I'm here with Chef B, who's going to tell us about one of our sponsors here. Chef?
Yeah, O&B Puckcast is now brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. The winter months can be especially hard on our homes, from roof damage and peeling siding to frozen pipes and toilet overflows. Call Summit Public Adjusters before you call your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be stressful and confusing. Let Summit Public Adjusters take the stress out of the claim process by having our guys work for you. Get the most for your money and your repairs. The next time the big snow or the rain leaves you with some home damage, contact us for a free consultation. Summit Public Adjusters are licensed in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Learn more at summitpublicadjusters.com or call 215-752-0560. Just tell them that the chef sent you.
Yeah, what was that number again, Chef?
215-752-0560.
That's terrific. All right, we're going to carry on with the rest of our show. And we are back. It's Isaiah. We're here with an O&B special, yet another one. And we're proud to have on from High and Wide Radio, Jim Iacovone, one of my favorite people on Flyers Twitter. And welcome to O&B Puckcast, my friend.
Isaiah, thank you. Thanks for the kind words. One of my favorite people as well. I'm excited to be on. Thanks for having me.
Great. So, look, we're all in a cheery mood today, and I don't understand why, but maybe I think the concentration today and why we're having this one-on-one special is I want to drill down on why many of us have a sense of almost relief, because we're not teetering one way or another. There is this not resignation. To me, it's almost anticipation that after almost a decade of wishing and hoping that Ron Hextall's magic plan would result in a window of Stanley Cup contention, it's over. It is freaking over. It ain't happening. And like, where do we go from here? And maybe it's time to get a little excited if you have any faith in Chuck Fletcher. Do you share my opinion on that?
So I don't know if it's relief for me anymore. I guess it's relief because this team is not going to keep pulling me back in. They're not going to keep getting me excited. I think I kind of lost all hope for this, at least this season, because every year we get pumped up again for the Flyers. But I lost all hope about a month ago. You know, the first couple months, this team didn't show you much. They were winning games somehow, and it was either the wheels were going to fall off or they were going to get their stuff together a little bit. The wheels fell off, and as soon as, that kind of started happening for me, I slowly checked out. So I guess, I do understand what you're saying with the relief. For me, it's the relief that I can just watch the Flyers now. I'm not emotionally invested because I know even if they do start to win games, this team's not going to make much noise. I'm disappointed in this season because of this time last year. Remember how excited everyone was? Mm-hmm. And now it's complete opposite. There's nowhere else to really turn. You mentioned Chuck Fletcher. He had a great first season, really didn't make any mistakes, couldn't have had a better first year. Year two, it's almost been the complete opposite. For me, it seems like he's had excuses ready-made and couldn't wait to use them when given the opportunity. It seemed like he put Band-Aids on the defense, failed to replace energy guys like Tyler Pitlick. I know we're hoping that Knack was going to step into that role. You lose a guy like Niskanen, and we all know the intangibles that he brought. Before the season started, I had a hard time believing that one guy was going to matter that much. But I think we're seeing, the loss of Niskanen. It crippled this team, which was amazing to me, how one guy mattered so much to this roster. And it starts to make you look at some of the guys higher up on the leadership totem pole on this team. And I'm not going to name names, but we know who we're talking about when we mention leadership on the roster. And
who could you be thinking about?
Those are the guys that we're looking at now, because no one's – I mean, Couturier's had a solid year. He missed some time. Claude Giroux, I think, looked like a different Claude Giroux. He's looked more emotionally invested, more. He's giving 100% every game. But there's other guys that I'm not sure this team can win with as long as they're on the roster. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on, if you like said players or not, there's going to have to be some moves.
I agree. I draw a parallel between this season and somewhat in 19. Like in 19, they were behind 2-0 in 32 out of 82 games. This season, they lost 9-0 and 8-3 to the Rangers and 6-1 to Buffalo, breaking 17 or 18 game losing streak.
Yeah.
And both seasons featured a general manager whose inaction in 19 it was the goaltenders, and in this season it was Chuck Fletcher not getting some kind of facsimile for Niskanen. But doesn't Niskanen kind of, his absence, the way this whole thing fell apart, speak to how fragile it was to begin with?
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of what I was pointing to. Like, you lose one guy and everything falls apart. Like, come on, it shouldn't be like that. Now, the things that we hear almost every day, every other day, it's a COVID year, it's a weird year. And this kind of ties in with your point there. It sounded like during Chuck Fletcher's press conference that some of the younger guys are still a bit fragile mentally. I mean, the toll that it's taken. Don't get me wrong. It's taken this whole past year has taken a toll on the players. I'm sure of it. But it's taken a toll on everybody else too. And in all 30 other teams' players. It's not just the Flyers. Now, I know they have a younger roster. Chuck Fletcher knows this. You lost one of your core veteran defensemen, if not your second best or arguably your best defenseman last season, and you replaced him with Erik Gustafsson. That's like malfeasance almost by the GM to not replace one of your core vets or not bring in other vets. Now, they had a chance to sign Zdeno Chara, who signed for the league minimum with the Capitals. And that kind of bothers me a little bit because you could have tossed him $1 million, 1.5. You gave Erik Gustafsson $3 million, and you can't pay Zdeno Chara. He's exactly what they need. So it kind of bothers me. I'm not sure where Chuck was going, what he was thinking during the offseason, but he completely blew this year. It looks like he knew that he was going to have excuses. He knew that it was going to be a pass for Vigneault, for the coaches, for himself, and said, okay, let's fill out the roster and see what happens. Now it's time to make a move. It's make a move or your season's done. And right now it's looking like it's done.
Yeah, Gus is this year's Chet Pickard, And that didn't work out too well.
No.
The thing is, we had Rush Joy on. And I know you have a lot of good guests at High and Wide Radio. You got to make sure you check those guys out. But he seemed to indicate the Flyers aren't the destination they used to be, and Chara simply did not really want to be here because he read Washington and playing with Ovi as a better experience and one that could put him in position to win another cup.
Sure.
So, I mean, there's that aspect of it as well. And from what I understand, the Flyers were in on Pietrangelo. He just wasn't interested. He wanted to go to Vegas. Everybody has a situation like Trouba. Everybody wanted Trouba. Trouba is a Robin, not a Batman. He's not really a great defenseman. He's like a Brent Seabrook kind of guy. So the Rangers are still waiting for their horse. I think the Flyers might be as well. That's a whole other topic. But there's many factors right now, and this kind of takes me back. Think about it. 10 years ago, the Flyers make the Richards-Carter trades, right? And if you look on paper, you say, oh, they won those transactions. But what does that mean? It's kind of like winning every battle, but losing the war, you know?
Exactly.
You know, it's like we won so many of these transactions, but in the end, we win nothing. And I'll take the rings, I'll take the cups over any first-round draft pick. You know, just like I'll take Neuendijk for Jerome McGinley in '99, so the Stars can cross that finish line and win a cup. Yeah, Jerome McGinley's a Hall of Famer. How many cups did Calgary have with Jerome McGinley? 0. They went to one final. So when they made those trades, I want to go back to that. To me, that's the seminal moment. What did they say then? What was the rap? Younger, bigger, faster, stronger. And you know what was resonating in my mind, man, last night? Last minute of the game. They couldn't win a puck battle. Where is younger? All right, that was 10 years ago. Faster? They're not real fast. Stronger? Nah, they're losing board battles. And what else did I say? Bigger? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You can't win. So they're told, you know, Couturier and Voracek, you know, need to hit the weight room. I don't know what it is. But it amounted to nothing for 10 fucking years.
It's like, who wants it more, right? And I've been a big, I've been kind of voicing my frustrations on Twitter a little bit, taking out my misplaced anger on, you know, some of the analytical guys. It's not really their fault, but it's kind of like, you know, you hear that the game has changed. You hear it's supposed to be played a certain way, and numbers this, Corsi that. And it's like, dude, sometimes all you got to be is bigger, stronger, and you have to want it just a little bit more than the other guy. And you look at some of the top paid players on this Flyers roster, and they don't have that same. I mean, just use the last 2 nights as an example, right? You're looking at David Pastrnak, perennial 40-goal scorer. You're looking at Patrice Bergeron in the Selke Trophy conversation every single year. And then Brad Marchand. Everybody hates him. You know, he's a pest, he's annoying, he's weird, but the guy produces. And it's like, you look at the Flyers, Claude Giroux, okay, yeah, maybe there's some will, there's desire, there's skill, absolutely. Jake Voracek plays when he wants to play. You know, James Van Riemsdyk plays when he wants to play. They have too many inconsistent guys. Travis Konechny you can toss into that category now, right? He's been MIA for a month and a half, 2 months.
Yeah, it's just 2 good games recently. That's it.
Right. He's playing better. And you know, I talk, I guess, a little bit negative about TK from time to time, but I like the player ultimately. It's just I want to see more consistency. And what I think scares me a little bit is that one of the most inconsistent players on the roster is a major voice in the locker room, and he's here for the next 5 years, making over $8 million a season, and he plays the wing. I guess you guys can all think of who that is now. It's Jake Voracek. And it's like, as long as that guy has a voice in that room and is going to, you know, rub off on all these younger players, we're in for a long run of mediocre hockey here, man, at least 4 or 5 years. Maybe even further, depending on how much he rubs off on some of the kids. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're just in a weird spot.
All right, but let's retrace the steps here. What are the problems with this team, and what has to be done? Let's try to unpack some of this here. Okay, number one, I think what you're speaking to when you talk about leadership, that kind of goes under the rubric of identity. Who do you want to be? And that speaks to the general manager putting pieces together. Because another part of what happened with the Carter Richards trades were like they got talent. They collected talent, but they never put a team together. With the pieces like you're talking about, Pastrnak, he's a shoot-first guy. He can pass. He's a great all-around player, but he's a shoot-first guy. And they don't have that big power forward that maybe could have stepped in and helped win that battle. They don't have that fast. They don't have enough fast twitch players like a TK. Like you get a guy like Barzal on the ice, you got to watch him every minute. He's a star. TK is kind of a flickering star, you know? And there's different elements that you expect from a team that's going to contend for a cup. You hope Carter Hart can get it together. I'm going to chalk this up to he got into some bad habits because of some of the things that you probably heard about off season. He wanted to help expand his game to another level, but he still hadn't nailed down what the success that he had prior. So he got into bad habits. And AV is giving him tough love. But anyway, so let's just say we can get back to that if need be. But you need strength up the middle. You need to have a good first pairing. You need the scoring winger, a power forward. And the Flyers have like little pieces of the puzzle that don't fit. And number one, speaking to your point, how the hell in the world can you come back losing Niskanen and not move heaven and earth to get a guy who's at least a reasonable facsimile to play with Provorov? And the way that lifted Provorov, and we see what's happening. All these kids are taking a step back except for Farabee.
I agree. And I understand what you said about Char wanting to go to the Capitals, play with a guy like Ovechkin, and he's an attractive player to want to play with. But if you're Chuck, I mean, throw a couple $1 million at him. Like, money changes a lot of things. Like, I bet it could change a 44-year-old Zdeno Chara's mind, where to play this year. And a guy like Chara would have lasting effects on some of these players. You learn a lot from a guy in a year who's been around the block.
Like Yager.
Zdeno Chara. Yeah, like Yager. See what he did to that team for the next, even when he was gone, that team they were a little bit different for the next 2 or 3 years. I think he really dropped the ball. I think, I don't know. I'm very disappointed in Chuck Fletcher from how excited I was last year to how he dropped the ball. And I'm not going to give him a pass, but I'm going to say, okay, he pretty much washed out year one with what he did in year two. Year three, he's got to take a huge jump because he took a step forward and took 2 steps back this year. He's got to get back on track. There's no excuses next year. 82-game season. Hopefully, God willing, no more COVID. I want to see less excuses, more action. You can be proactive, and that's what he was in year one, and he was the opposite this year. That's what freaks me out a little bit about Chuck Fletcher is he had excuses ready to go, and I can't remember exactly the moves that he made during the last expansion draft, but Vegas got a hold of some pretty good players from that Minnesota team, and it's kind of freaking me out a little bit, Well, not sure I trust Chuck that.
You could
much.
say they got a fucking haul, but what they got was Tuck and Hauler, right? And that was after he had traded what's his name for Martin Hansel, and so he got burned, and he's got like that kind of like battered wife thing going on with this whole expansion thing. That's what I'm afraid of.
Me too. I'm not sure that I trust him. I don't know if he's the guy that I want steering the Flyers through what's happening right now or what's coming. I'm a little bit like, oh man, this could be really bad.
Well, again, hearkening back to something Russ Joy was talking about, where Dave Scott gets a name. They get Chuck Fletcher. They were familiar with him. They were comfortable. But the real ballsy choice would have been the guy, I think he's in Florida now, Bill Zito, who was the assistant general manager to Yarmo in Columbus. Yep. He's a smart guy, and he's ballsy, and that's what it's going to take to change things. And I want 100%. To get into maybe some particulars now. And Elliot Friedman, on his 31 Thoughts podcast and in some of his columns, has had some interesting things to say. But let's deal with the top of the deck. He said the Flyers are in for some big-time surgery in the offseason. Now,
love it.
I mean, this is what he's hearing something, and even to the point where they want a number one defenseman so bad, they're changing their thoughts on whether they want to go from a 7-3-1 protection scheme for expansion, 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, and a goalie, to 4 forwards, 4 defensemen, and a goaltender. That's how bad the Niskanen gap, you want to call it that, has affected the team in their minds, their psyches. And, again, they're so bruised by that. So that means we got to shed a salary, and we got to start talking about particular players without malice, but just, being honest. And some guys have to go, and I have a particular thought about a guy who's been playing well this year. And I think I want to start there because to me it's at the top of the heap, and that's Claude Giroux. Mm-hmm. And I have some ideas about a conversation you could have with him. But let me get your thoughts on some of the things I just referred to.
I'm on board with it. I think, the Flyers forward group is they have guys that I'd be okay with. Who is it? Seattle taking off their hands. And, I'm just looking at contracts here. Jake Voracek, Kevin Hayes, James Van Riemsdyk are three players that, right off the bat, I'd be okay with Seattle taking. I don't know if Kevin Hayes can be taken. He's got a no movement clause, but I'm just throwing his name out there.
Right.
So those three guys I'm perfectly okay not protecting as part of the four. Claude Giroux, I can't imagine that Seattle would come in and, take your captain. So I would leave him unprotected.
Well, you have to protect him. He's got no move too.
Oh, he does. Okay. So he's automatically under the four players.
Correct.
Then. Okay. And then Kevin Hayes, I guess, is the other one as well. Okay. So that makes things a little bit interesting here because you're going to leave, one of TK, Couturier, Lindblom, or Farabee. You're going to leave two of those guys available. Wow.
I'm not sure Farabee. I think Farabee does have to be protected, but I'm not sure.
Since he's on his rookie deal, is he part of that or no? Does that matter?
You got me on this. That is something I have to check out. People in the audience are probably like screaming in their cars and, could you not know that? Hey, listen, man, I'm sorry I don't know every bit of the legal brief that is the CBA. But anyway, we'll continue.
Okay. Yeah, I guess since you have to cover Giroux, Voracek, Giroux and Hayes, that makes things a little bit more cloudier. Let me see Chuck go get a defenseman first, and then, I will talk about switching the strategy. Depends what defenseman he gets, I guess. If not, then I'm perfectly fine just protecting Provorov, Sanheim, Myers, and, take whoever you want after that. That's interesting. I'm not sure. What are your thoughts on the switch up?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you in terms of get the defenseman, whether they're going to trade for somebody like Ryan Ellis, Seth Jones. I don't know if he'd be available, and I got to check his status. I'd even kind of look at, even though he's more of a defensive defenseman, he definitely play first pair. Adam Larson for Edmonton. I think I got to check that out. So I'll keep yakking. And then there's a UFA market. There's guys like Dougie Hamilton. We have a lot of museums here. And that's a little joke. People know what that means. But it shouldn't be a problem. He should find a lot of time on his own, and he'll have a good time in Philly if he wants to come here. He'd be a real compliment to Provorov. He brings offense, good puck movement. He has a very high hockey IQ. So you also want to keep that in mind as well, because you might have a player of a certain ability, but stylistically he may not match as well as you would like. But I say get the defenseman. Yeah, Larson is going to be a UFA. So even though there's not a lot of offense there, he's 28. He's coming off a contract, pays him $4.167. So he's going to be looking, because he's really his analytics are really, really good. Offense, he's more of a puck mover kind of offense. He's not going to blast the puck. But I'd put him in the conversation as well. You could trade for a guy like I talked about earlier, Ellis. You got it wrapped up at like 6.5 or whatever it is. And that could be a very good move. He's not the biggest guy, but he's very efficient. He's not as good as Yossi, but he's a little bit better than Ekholm, even without the snarl. That's because Ekholm brings some of that. But I would say whatever it would take within reason to get a guy like Ryan Ellis, because, he's a very good contract for the next 5 years, 6.25. So those are some names of some guys. And plus, I'm also interested depending on what happens with Moran and other things. Maybe I'd also, if they'd be willing to move a guy like a Samheim or a Myers, bringing in like a second pair guy like David Savard to give them some snarl, to make the dirty areas in front of the Flyers net actually dirty. They're certainly dirty in front of the Boston net, right? But they're not in front of the Flyers net until Moran came by. I mean, those are some of the ideas I have.
Yeah, and I like those ideas. For me, what I would like to see, if I had, my exact wish, I would like for the Flyers to trade for Ryan Ellis, just because he's got, like you mentioned, a great contract, immediate, top pairing guy. And then, like you just said, if they could then go into the off season and just look at a guy where they could fill out, like a David Savard or a Josh Manson or even a Colin Miller to put on your bottom pairing or something. That would be the route that I would like to see. I want to see a trade done now. And if they're trading for Ryan Ellis, to me, that signals they're already looking towards next season, because he is out. I think he's missing a decent amount of time. And yeah, I would feel more confident if they made the trade now and signed a free agent in the offseason. If they went into the offseason still needing potentially 2 defensemen, I would be a little bit worried. I don't trust Chuck Fletcher to sign. Let's say he had to sign, I'm just going to say Ryan Ellis. He would overpay. I would assume he would pay $7-8 million. You can get a guy for 6.25 now, and then go fill it out and go sign a guy for $4 or $5 million. That's what I would do.
Well, that makes sense, because having cost certainty is important. You look how they had to overpay to get Hayes, and Hayes was a nice plug-in last year, especially with what happened with Nolan Patrick. And we'll get to him in a second. But I agree, because here's my approach to the trade deadline. I'm not a buyer. I'm not a seller. This is like, and I agree with Bill Meltzer. I said this on a couple shows. It's 07. It's 06, 07 again. I am remaking the team, and I want to do something before the end of this year, which would necessitate they do it before the trade deadline, which is Monday, coming up, by the way, and to let the fans know, hey, we're taking a different direction. So whatever happens, I don't care about this season so much as in terms of where we finish. I mean, you want to be competitive, fine, but I care more about telling the fans and showing the guys that are going to be playing here, we care. We're changing direction. We see what's happened. We know things have to make a change. We're getting X guy. We're trading Morgan Frost, whatever, and Zamula and a first-round pick to get Ryan Ellis, whatever. I'm not saying that would be the deal, but just to, as an example. And we're getting this done because we're nailing this down going into the offseason to let you know we're not screwing around. And treat this offseason and this whole period now as like we're remaking the team. I might buy a little, I might sell a little, but we are going to be different.
I think that's what's needed. Yeah, it's time to turn the page on some of these guys. To me, I'm not sure what Nashville is looking for. It seems to have a couple guys locked up down the middle of the ice, and I'm trying not to get too specific, throwing names around, because I don't like to propose trades and whatnot, but they could use wingers, and certain player on the Flyers has, the same lengthy contract as a certain player that we want from the Predators for the next 5 years. So he's making $2 million more. I'm not saying that they can get rid of this guy in Voracek, but if there's a chance to get rid of him, this is it, I think. I would overpay for a guy like Ryan Ellis too. So Voracek plus, go get your guy. That I think when Fletcher went and got Hayes, it was a trade. When he went and got Niskanen, it was a trade. When he went and got Braun, it was a trade. Go get your guy. You don't have to explain why you gave up what you gave up. Go get your guy. If you truly believe, that you're building something good, go get your guy, and you don't have to explain why you gave up what you gave up. Just make it work. If AV says he needs this guy, go get that guy. If you got to trade whoever from the farm, plus a player, plus a pick that we might not ever see in NHL, dude, get rid of it. Because this whole prospect thing, it was fun for 4, 5, 6, I don't know how many years it is now.
Yeah.
But oh my God, I don't watch the Flyers to like. This feels like watching the Phillies or watching, the Sixers when I was younger. Like, I used to watch them because they'd always get a new pitcher or a new player coming up to play on the pro team, and it was fun. I don't watch the Flyers for that. I watch them to win. I want to see them win a Stanley Cup.
Yep.
I'm so sick of watching Tanner Lazinski's up, everyone get excited, or this guy's up, everyone get excited. I want to see actual players, and I want to see them win. I'm tired of the mediocrity. I think everyone else is too.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have lived through the 2 Stanley Cup runs. I always defend the franchise. They went to the finals 6 other times, and each time they went up against a dynasty team. I can name every one, every appearance. In fact, I can name every Stanley Cup winner from 1969 on. But that's about the only thing I do well. But anyway, so I defend them. But there was a fundamental change with Hextall, and we were fed this line about, how they really had to recruit the prospects. I like a lot of things Hextall did in terms of development and installing protocols, and there was a rhyme and a reason about things. But at some point, you have to say, like you're referring to, what is the actual mission statement? It should be to win a Stanley Cup. And back in the Flyers Cup days, Keith Allen got to a point where he knew his team was in a window, and they thought to themselves, and this is in like all the books about the team and at the time and all that, will this move bring us closer to winning a Stanley Cup? Well, guess what? The Flyers aren't even in that realm yet. They're not even in consideration after all this time. They're loaded with mid-6 prospects like you wouldn't believe. So you know what? Start using some of them like chips, because some of them are like stocks. They go sour. And I think we can just off the top of our head name a couple guys. Rubtsov, maybe. I mean, he's worth nothing. He's worth nothing. And you can, while the guy still has the promise in the eyes of whoever general manager of being viable as a player, it's time to move. It's time to move. Because now you get that second wave of Flyers, whether it's Konechny or Farabee, Lindblom. This is next generation. Fletcher has to decide who is going to be part of that next generation and who is going to be sacrificed or is on that fence. Like if you push him hard enough, he'll let go of the guy. And I think you got to build a team and have an identity. And that is so lacking. And it's time to nail down some of those positions that'll put you in that position.
I agree. And that's what I think, going out and getting a player who has leadership qualities, but here's the thing. You bring in a guy that can change a room, you need to get rid of the guys who like how the room is, who are content, who are happy with how things are. So if you bring in a guy to change the room, you can't have anybody in there that's going to push back. So it's kind of like you have to get rid of certain guys. I know I keep coming back to the same player. Some guys, though, you have to find a way to move and then bring in the guys who are going to change the atmosphere in the room. They need to be a player that can come in and automatically take control. That's going to cut all the shit out. Anything that happened before I got here, it's like not going to be the same. Exactly.
Remember how Pronger got like all over Richards and Richards all pissed off? But it's what they needed.
Exactly that. And I always thought, we toss around the leadership thing all the time, and the first thing that people say is, well, you're not in the room, you don't know this. Players, people in general have tells. They give away things about themselves without even realizing it. If you watch a guy's body language, if you watch the way he talks to other people that, don't really matter to him, but he treats them like they matter anyway. You can pick things up from people and players. And, what comes to mind for me is, and it's a simple thing because it happened most recently, I think, Jake Voracek, a couple things this year, that whole Mike Sealski thing. A leader doesn't do that, in my opinion.
Nope.
If he's got an issue with you, he takes you to the side, talks to you about it. We never hear about it. Fans, media, nobody hears about it. That's what a leader does. What Jake Voracek did with, I think, Travis Konechny sitting right next to him, right? Yep. So now he's showing Travis Konechny that, hey, this is okay to talk to these people like this. It's not. It's unprofessional. It doesn't look good. I thought it was a joke. I know a lot of people like that stuff because it's people it's hockey players being candid and whatnot. But I thought that was total bush league. Then there was another thing that he said recently, that playing a full 60 minutes is impossible. It's a hockey cliche. That's one of your leaders on your team saying that. It's just mind-boggling to me. Like, dude, either stop talking or like they got to find a way to get rid of this guy. I don't like to throw the word cancer around because it's a serious thing, and some people are sensitive to it. But this guy is poisoning everybody in that room, especially the younger kids who are supposed to look up to him for leadership. You have to find a way to get rid of Jake Voracek and bring in players that can change that room. That's just my opinion.
Well, I agree. I think that was basically when he did that thing with Sealski. It's like, don't show your ass like that. You represent the Flyers. You represent the leadership group. And that's one of the things I totally agree. I think they should be looking at if Boston lets go of a guy like David Krejci next year, as part of what I'm doing, I'd be looking to get a guy with some pedigree and all that. But again, like you're saying, you can't have someone who clashes with the old leadership group. And just think of what Justin Braun said about how fragile the Flyers are. Well, they've been fragile for how long? They lose 10 straight, they win 10 straight. It's like the same thing over and over again. How long can we keep doing this? And let me drill down on Voracek. Look, he's a productive player, but you're right. He's a winger, and he represents an old guard that hasn't won spit. Nothing. What I would work as hard to get rid of him as I would to get a defenseman. You have a lot of prospects. It's just something has to change because they're never going to win with that kind of attitude. Mm-hmm. They're too easy to play against. I talked about earlier with the board battle and I said, this is the Flyers. Like I said earlier, this is the Flyers the last 10 years, right there. That's got to stop. Yep. So yeah, I think they got to bring in guys with pedigree and they got to usher out enough guys that have been here for all this time because they're not winning nothing.
No, and I think there's more work that needs to be done to this roster than, people actually think. Because you look at the roster, take all that other stuff out of it, all the intangible stuff, and you're like, this team might be a piece or two away, But when you consider all that, it's like, that locker room needs some serious change, man. Like anybody that comes into that room is just going to get sucked into that stuff.
It's a vortex of excuses.
Yep.
I mean, look at like a guy like who I consider a prima donna. I don't know him from Adam, but we've been privy to some things about Nolan Patrick. Mm-hmm. He's the excuse king. Look, I have migraine syndrome. I've had it for 20 years, so I can sympathize. But I just don't think for a guy who had this kind of pedigree, I think they rushed him. I think he should have went back to juniors. He missed a lot of time. He should have been the BMOC at the WJC. I think that would have helped him mature. But you know what? They didn't do that. And I heard that also that Ron Hextall wanted Nolan Patrick against the objection of some prominent scouts. Yep. Heard that as well. Well, this guy, not only is he slow twitch, he doesn't move with the pace of the game. He looks more and more like a lumbering third-line winger, even though he possesses at least second-line talent. And just off with it. I'm done with it. I know he hasn't played tons of hockey, but he's still mainly a perimeter player. I have seen him, give him credit, get closer to the net. But for the most part, unless it's a power play, he's nowhere to be found near the net. So
that's true.
Guys like that, I don't want it. I want guys that are greasy. Look at Boston. Look, the Flyers dominated in the second period. But if you took every period collectively that we played against the Bruins hit you and make you pay for every space of the ice. Yeah. Is that coaching? Is that the culture? Is it the talent? It's the orientation that comes from the team through the leadership group and the coaches. And it's expressed on the ice. Somewhere along the line, there's a leak. And I think there's a couple leaks in the ship.
I agree. Everything you just said is true about Boston. I think, I can't remember if I heard it on the Flyers feed or the Bruins feed, But in between the second and the third period, Patrice Bergeron didn't let the coaches into the room, and had to talk with the guys. Obviously told them they need to play better defensively. I'm not sure what he said in the room, but whatever he said, it worked because the Flyers only had 3 shots in the third period, So that's leadership. And it also takes guys listening that want to listen to Patrice Bergeron. He's been around the block. He's won Stanley Cups. He's won Selkies. Plays on one of the best lines in hockey,
He's a Hall of Famer.
Hall of Famer. So as far as Nolan Patrick, so Nolan Patrick's a weird situation, right? Because you can't really say anything about him or to him because he's another one. And I'm not insensitive to what he's got going on, but he's got a built-in excuse already. And that's, he's been through a lot. He went through last year. He's playing this way because, maybe he doesn't want to get hurt again, or this is kind of like, just a year where he's got to work out the kinks. That's how I'm looking at it. And it sucks. Like before the season started, I said if Nolan Patrick can just play the entire year, that's a win and not get hurt. That's what's happening right now. I didn't expect him to produce. I don't know if I expected him to even score 10 goals, but he's playing. I imagine, having not played for over a year and playing this many games in this little time, it's not an easy thing to do. So I do empathize with him a little bit there. Having said that, this is a former number 2 overall pick. Hasn't done squat since he's been here. We've heard the rumors. I've been talking a lot about how this team doesn't have enough hungry players. I'm not saying Sam Morin is the most skilled player in the world, but you cannot question a guy's desire and will coming back from what he's come back from just to live out his dream of playing in the NHL, and he's here. Those guys bring something that a guy like Nolan Patrick cannot bring, who, was the 2nd overall pick, was the best player in every league he's been in throughout his life. Gets to the NHL, and you have to take your game up to a next level because you're not the best player in the league anymore. You're not the best player on your team anymore. You have to be hungry to get better. You have to be hungry to be the best. You have to be hungry to stay on the team. And when things get hard, you can't shy away. Now, I'm not saying that's what Nolan Patrick's doing, but as a fan who just watches games, that's certainly what it looks like to me. And that's how I perceive Nolan Patrick to be. It's frustrating. And when you brought up, that whole Hextall thing going against the scouts, what's the point of having scouts if you're not going to listen to them? I used to watch highlights of Heiskanen and McCarr and think, man, these guys are really good. But as things seemingly get worse and worse with Nolan Patrick, I get a little bummed out. It's like, dude, these guys could be on our team, and somehow we got stuck with Nolan Patrick. Now, this is not to say that, he's going to wake up one day and be like, all right, I'm 100% back to myself. Let me get back to playing hockey and focusing 100% on hockey. That could very well happen. In my opinion, though, time could be running out in Philadelphia. I think he's going to be an RFA after this year, right? So he could be back for one more year. I'm not sure, though.
I think he's arbitration eligible after this year.
Okay.
I think he has been pampered most of his life. You listen to his uncle, James, who played in the league for the Rangers. I remember him. Mm-hmm. And the impression I get, he talked about Nolan. Nolan sometimes can take a while to get going, but once he gets his game in gear, he's not arbitration eligible. He's just a regular RFA.
Okay.
Nick Obey-Kubel is arbitration eligible. But, yeah, he's just a regular RFA. My feeling is that he's a bit of a prima donna. He hasn't had his comeuppance moment, and he may have tested the patience of this organization for the last time. I think it's possible he could salvage his career, but let's be honest. You mentioned Sam Morin in a pointed way, because I think, it's out there in the open. If he wanted it as much as Sam wanted it, what kind of player would he be?
Could you imagine?
Maybe
absolutely at least a second-line center, 50, 60, 70-point guy. I mean, come on. If Sam Morin had Nolan Patrick's skill, that's a top 4 defenseman, top 2 defenseman. I'm a huge – I don't know if I'm a huge Sam Morin fan, but I can't help but root for a guy like that. He's easy for someone like me to root for, not the most skill, but he will absolutely outwork you. And to me, I'll take guys that work hard over a guy with skill that won't work any day of the week,
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, when I forget it was Craig Button predicted that Nolan Patrick had Trevor Linden upside.
Mm.
And that's a hell of a damn good player. Great two-way player, consistent,
Absolutely.
night in, night out. The only thing consistent about Nolan Patrick is inconsistency. So,
and Isaiah, like, that's the entire team, and it starts at the top, right? Like say what you want about Claude Giroux. I like him. Had a couple down years, but he is what he is. Voracek, inconsistent. James Van Riemsdyk, inconsistent. It's starting to rub off on TK now, inconsistent. Nolan Patrick, what's his third season in the league playing? Inconsistent. Like, it's just rubbing off on everybody. Like, get rid of these top guys because it's trickling down. You're poisoning the well over here.
Yeah, if it's not going to work, take the hit. Make some good hockey trades. Use your prospects to make these trades palatable talent-wise, because you've been building all this time. So in other words, if you got to give up a little bit more to get out of some of these contracts, and maybe the value isn't there, the end product should be better than if you just have to take the hit and get a lesser player. Now all of a sudden you're a lesser team, and what was the purpose? So use some of these prospects. Hold some money. That's another strategy. There's a lot of different levers of that can be pulled by Chuck Fletcher to try and get himself out of this, because I agree. And you did hone in on one of the last topics I wanted to hit, and it is Claude Giroux. And somebody asked me on Twitter, what would I do with Claude Giroux? And I feel very strongly he's one of the best Flyers of all time. And I watch a team 50 plus years. People are probably sick of me saying that all the time, but it's true. Okay, he has a no-move clause, so he's got to be protected. But here's what I would do, because this is how committed I am to making a change. The discussion begins in the exit interviews. He's going to give his feedback, and Chuck Fletcher and AV are going to give their feedback. And I would tell Giroux, this is what I want to do. I would tell him that we want to make some significant changes with this team next year. And that may represent a step or two back. But we feel like the current course that we're on is not going to work, and that we have to make a change. We would like, with his permission, to anoint Sean Couturier as the captain of the team, with Claude as an alternate captain, to kind of pave the way and smooth the path for the next era of Flyers hockey. Some people might think that's a slap in the face. I don't know. Let me run the whole thing by you, though. I would also tell him, and this is the part that's going to be tough for people to swallow, that he will be in his last year as a Flyer, as he will not be offered a contract. This is his last year. It's just something that they feel they have to do to make the kind of changes they need to have the cap space and everything else. So I would tell him that, and I would say, listen, you've been a great Flyer. We haven't given you what you needed around you. I think we all know that. And then I'd say the quiet part out loud. We want you to think about this discussion and talk about it with your agent, your family, and see if you're okay with coming back under those conditions. And we welcome you back with open arms if that's the case. If not, then we can have a discussion about an alternative scenario. That's exactly how I would handle Claude Giroux.
I think that's fair. He'll be 34 next year. January 12th, he'll be 34 years old, which is the last year of his contract. I don't know. Is he going to be, would he rather, see, here's the thing. Would he rather sign, let's say, a 2-3 year deal and kind of toil around with doing whatever the Flyers are doing for, half of what he's making now? Or would he rather take a shot winning a Stanley Cup somewhere? I'm not 100% sure that Claude Giroux would say, give me a shot to go win a Stanley Cup. Not to say anything negative about the guy, but I think he's okay with how things are here. You know what I'm saying? So I would bet, if we were going to bet on this, that he would say, no, I'm not going to waive my no movement clause. Now, everything that you're saying is great. It would be great if he said, yeah, try to move me. I understand what you guys are doing. You're going to take a step back. I would rather, take my talents to, I don't know, Colorado, let's say. They could use a winger of like Claude Giroux or something. Yeah, it makes sense for the player if he's playing to win a Stanley Cup. Makes sense for the Flyers because they clear off $8 million in cap. Maybe they get something coming back the other way, and they have a couple extra bucks to sign a player the following season. I'm just not 100% sure that Claude Giroux would say, I'll be happier somewhere else. Yeah, I think he's okay with where he is here.
Yeah, but you know what? I'd be okay with that. I prefer a scenario where he says, "Man, I got to win a cup," right?
Yeah,
that's
me too.
That's what I prefer. I'd be willing to eat some money and work it out and do all that. The thing is, by making Couturier the captain, and he'll be like the last topic I want to get to, because that's a whole other thing. But by doing that, that announces to the fans and tells the rest of the team there are change big time. This is a seismic shift in culture and philosophy. And that is so necessary. That is why I feel that strategy should be played out, and you have to be able to live with either result.
Yeah, I guess it would be somewhat of, I don't know if you're Claude Giroux. I'm not sure how players feel about, the letters and stuff like that. But I guess from fan perspective, it's like, that's kind of a slap in the face. He's here for his last year and they take the C from him, So let's say Claude Giroux looks at it like that also. Maybe he's a little bit offended. Maybe it's not something that he wants. And yeah, now he wants to get out of here because, he can see kind of the writing on the wall. He doesn't want to be in that room. Who knows how he's going to take it. I would agree with you in that sense, though. I think Couturier is the leader of this hockey club. If you pay attention to how he talks to media, some of the answers that he gives, he cares, and he's an elite player. A couple of shows last season, I used to say I'm not sure Coots is elite. I don't think he's a star. Now I think, yes, he's absolutely elite. He's absolutely a star, maybe an underrated star who doesn't get the national attention. Maybe the Selke will change some of that, but Claude Giroux is 100%. I'm sorry, Sean Couturier is 100% the leader, the best player, and should be the next captain of the Philadelphia Flyers.
Yeah, I don't consider Couturier an elite center overall, or an elite. I think he's an elite defensive player, but I think his deficiencies offensively, the fact that he really is not usually a factor unless he's within like 10 feet of the net. He doesn't stare anybody. He's not particularly great at receiving or making passes. He's good. He's got the vision, but his physical skill package doesn't translate that well on the power play. I'm not really worried when he's on a line rush if I'm the opposing team. I think that lack is what takes him out of the elite category. That's where I put Barkov above him. Okay, even though his defensive numbers are better, the eye test takes over at that point. What does your gut say when Barkov comes over the line? You don't know what he's going to do. He's got a much better skill package. And even though you need guys like Couturier to win defensively, Barkov is pretty damn good defensively too. Not as good as Couturier, but overall, if you balance it out, I think Couturier is like the 14th best center in the entire league, which kind of takes him out of the elite cap. But that's like semantics after a while. He's definitely the best player they have. I'd like to think at some point they get a better player, a player who's better offensively, and that's kind of why we want to change. It's part of the reason we want to make these changes. But yeah, I'm willing to live with G in his last year. What I don't want to do is play this game where the fans fall in love with the name on the back. I want to do what's right for the crest, the sweater. Yeah.
I'm on the same boat, man. Some of that stuff it's silly, Some of the stuff that we see that on Twitter, fans fall in love with the players, and I get it. And I used to be like that too when I was 13, 14, 15 years old. But now it's like, come on, don't you want to see a Stanley Cup? You know, like some of these guys, you have to move some of these guys. Like, for example, my favorite player on this roster is Scott Lawton. We're seeing trade rumors pop up about him.
Yeah.
Go ahead, and if it means, like you said earlier, if it somehow brings you closer to a Stanley Cup, please make the deal. As much as I like Scotty, they're not winning a cup this year. He's in the last year of his deal. It makes sense for the team to move him. Go ahead, I'm not going to lose any sleep over Scott Law, and I'm not going to lose any sleep over any player on this team getting traded. I want to see a cup.
I think that has to be the mission statement. That has to be what drives them. I'd love if Claude Giroux finished here. A lot of Flyers finished here, but I think Jerome McGinley is an even better player than Claude Giroux was over the balance of his career, and he didn't finish up in Calgary, and they didn't want to trade him for a lot of the same reasons people don't want Claude Giroux to play for another team. I'm at a point where I'm past that. We gave it a decade. That's forever. Forget about it. It's not going to work out. If that's the case, time to cut it loose, man.
Hey, Wayne Gretzky got traded a couple times, didn't he?
Yeah, sure did.
There you go.
Some of the best players ever played the game got traded for whatever reason, and the Flyers are stuck in a cap hole. So
let's get rid of these mediocre players. I mean, I'm sorry, not mediocre, but let's go get good players. Let's be good enough to win a Stanley Cup.
Let's stop being a mediocre team, and if that means having to take a step back or so, look what the Rangers did in the space of about 3 years. I mean, I know they had the drawing card of New York, so Breadman and Robin, I call Robin Trouba, wanted to go there. Fine. But when are we going to make Philly a go-to destination again? When's that going to happen? Remember, it used to be we were in everybody all the time. I'm not saying I like free agency, but just the idea that you're a go-to destination. The Flyers are not. That has to change, and it starts with some pain. Toronto went through it. Colorado went through it. The Rangers went through it. So all these people that say, "Oh, it takes 6 to 8 years. You have to have draft." Put the Vaseline away. This is garbage. You know what I mean? This is nonsense. It's so easy to prove that's not the case. Yeah. So I mean, all right. Last thing, man. I hope people feel like we got some ideas here that make them feel a little bit better, or at least get their juices flowing about what could be possible. I mean, that's kind of what we're trying to do today, right?
Yeah.
But
it doesn't have to be like this. It could be so much better. You just have to let go of some guys.
Yeah, what it is?
Because you know what's going to happen. The guys they bring in, you're going to love just as much when they're scoring 40 goals a year, or when they're up for a Norris Trophy every year, whatever it is.
Or they're trying to win a board battle late in the game, and they look like he-men instead of 98-pound weaklings.
Yeah.
There's an old ad in like one of the comic books. Charles Atlas. He had a course, like an isometric dynamic tension course. And there's a whole little cartoon about the insult that made a man out of Mac. And it's like this little guy who gets pushed around on the beach. He goes and does Charles Atlas, and he's all muscles, and he punches the guy out. Of course, the course even had a boxing lessons in it, or no, I have it. It's just like a collector's item. But that's what I think about watching the Flyers. I still can't get out of that. Watching the team for this many years, and then when the shift took place, and the Flyers traded Carter and Richards, that's more or less when they shifted the focus to this like smart hockey player. Move the puck. We draft intelligent guys. The hell with the beef and the bulk and the tough guy. Listen, nobody wants to go back to the bullies. But compare what the Flyers are with teams like, St. Louis and Boston. And, look what Tampa had to do to take that next step. They had all the skill elements and puck-moving elements, but they needed that grit, that grind. They needed to win a battle. So you bring in guys like Blake Coleman and who's the guy that was here, Maroon, and I forget who else, and a couple defensemen that had a little, grit and jam that could win some battles late in games, But Sean Couturier is up for a contract after next season. Okay, what does that mean? If you pay Sean Couturier, right, he's underpaid now, because he's making 4.33, and in the 23 season, at the age of 30, you're going to have to pay him like at least a 5-year deal, maybe a 6-year deal. And he's going to want like between 8 and 9, especially since the cap is going to start opening up. Last question that we want to consider today. Is that repeating the mistake that they made with Claude Giroux?
Only if they don't build around Sean Couturier like they didn't build with Claude Giroux. I think what happened the last, most of the decade now, Claude Giroux signed that contract on July 4th, 2013, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And they haven't started to try to win until last season, 2020. So Claude Giroux, for some reason, was drugged through 6 years of, we're not rebuilding, we're just drafting. If they do that with Sean Couturier, it will be a waste. If they're not planning on winning a Stanley Cup for the next 4, 5, 6 years, because that's what happened with Hextall. They weren't planning on winning a cup for 6 years, however long that went on. If that's the plan, then trade Sean Couturier and use whatever you get back, as part of the future. If they're trying to win a Stanley Cup now, and between the next 2 years, hopefully it's 2, we could say 2 to 3, but I want it to be sooner, then I would say you absolutely need Sean Couturier to win a Stanley Cup. And it would make sense to sign him for, 5 years, $8 million, $9 million. But like I said, if they're going to half-ass a rebuild or do whatever the hell they did with Claude Giroux, then no, it's not worth it. You're just going to drag him through the mud with all that crap. And what's the point of having a Sean Couturier if you're not planning on winning the Stanley Cup? Get something for him. So I think there's two sides to that coin. If you're going to try to win and add to this roster, make the necessary moves, then yeah, I would absolutely sign Sean Couturier. I think he's an essential part of this team. Obviously, an elite defensive center. He's good enough to be a point per game player, I believe, at least for a couple seasons more. And it would make a lot of sense to re-sign him.
Gotcha. I got some concerns about some of the lower body injuries. The fact that he's at a certain threshold with his speed, and if he does lose some foot speed, does that make him a much lesser player? Does he all of a sudden kind of convert to a guy who's more of a second, third line guy? I don't know. These are only considerations. I'm not totally sold on him one way or another in terms of a re-sign. Obviously, a lot of people have talked about him as a piece for a player like Jack Eichel. Eichel's not a perfect player either. He'd be the highest skilled player the Flyers would have had since probably Eric Lindros. So that's very exciting. But does he have the right mindset? Is he just a more talented Nolan Patrick who's been pampered, a bit of a prima donna, everything has to be right? Or is Jack Eichel beyond that? Is Jack Eichel just rounding into form at a time when he just wants to get the hell out of Buffalo? It might be something that the Flyers would have to do if they want to get a premier player for the first time in a long time. And Dave Scott likes big names, fancy names to sell people. The pandemic's going to be over. The capacity is going to be close to 100% probably a year or 18 months from now. That could be in their minds. So, again, just nothing definite, but just want to throw out some considerations to the contrary, or at least presenting both sides. Yeah,
absolutely. If you got a chance to go get Jack Eichel, I would consider moving Sean Couturier. Absolutely, even if you need to add a little bit. You mentioned Eric Lindros, and for me, that's who I watched growing up. Now the Flyers never won a Stanley Cup, but I remember loving watching the Flyers. And if I think about the last 10 years watching the Flyers, it's horse crap, basically. There was not a lot of fun watching this team for most of the last decade.
I agree. I mean, it starts with fun. This is not a fun team. There's not tons of fun players. I mean, I watch guys like Forster and Allison and the way they shoot first down in Lehigh Valley. And I'm like, these guys are kind of like second and third line players respectively, but just that we haven't had that kind of player in so long. Bigger guy, looks for a shot. It just speaks to what like, what were they doing over these last 10 years? You know?
They were drafting all the safe players, man. They were drafting defense and the two-way forwards, and unfortunately, it's so boring. And how many of these guys are as far as forwards? How many are on the roster right now? I mean, Morgan Frost unfortunately got hurt. You know, Farabee's up here. We're watching Albe Kubel up here. Lazinski just came up, but I mean, none of these. I'm sorry, Farabee's very good. I think he's going to be a very good player, but none of these guys are going to light the. Yeah, I mean, there's no top line scoring winger that's going to pie 35, 40 goals. You know, the way they've drafted centers is, you know, as far as drafting two-way forwards, like, there's no center prospect in the system where I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait for this guy to come up. Like, they're in deep shit when it comes to centers, in my opinion.
No, I agree, because they're going to have to clear out, like, Nolan Patrick. They might lose Morgan Frost in an effort to get a defenseman or to help attach someone, you know, to get the Barnacle contract, like Voracek off the books, right?
Sure.
So it might take something that drastic. And then who's at center? It's that third line center problem again. I mean, and I don't, as much as I like Lawton and, like, I agree with your sentiment, he wasn't really good enough to hold a third line center. He's more of a third line winger, really good fourth line center kind of player, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay. Because the hockey smarts aren't quite there. So again, pieces fitting together. So the synergy is there.
It's a good word to use.
This team
lacks that.
They lack synergy. Yeah. It's how you, again, build a team. Don't just collect talent. And this is where I think the analytics falls down. And because the intangibles is like the cement or the glue that holds that together. Yep. That's missing, and then the complementary pieces and synergy is not there. That's got to change.
Yeah, you said it. I couldn't say it any better. You said exactly what the issue is. That's it.
All right. So we're going to wrap it there. I just want to remind people that the O&B Puckcast is sponsored, along with the FlyersNittyGritty.com, of course, by Jim's South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia. 4 decades of some of the best cheesesteaks and hoagies you'd ever want. It's got to be on your bucket list. You got to have it. With or without, doesn't matter. And if you live nearby at 400 South Street, you can just use DoorDash and they'll deliver that delicious food right to your door. So check them out, Jim's South Street, right at 400 South Street in Philadelphia. And with that, Jim, it's been great having you, man. Where can people get you on social? Let's hear about the High and Wide Radio Network.
Yeah, so we're on Twitter at HW Radio 18, also on Facebook, HW Radio 18. We are on Twitch now and YouTube, HW Radio. You can find us. We just teamed up with Belly Up Sports. Make sure you guys check out their site, bellyupsports.com. You can find us as well as other great hockey podcasts. And check out our site, hwhockey.net. We record live shows and recorded shows, a lot of great stuff with Kyle and Jack on there. And, yeah, Isaiah, thanks for having me, man. I always have a good time hanging out with you.
Yeah, fantastic. Jim's a great guy. You got to check him out. Make sure you follow him on social. And, of course, if you want to yell at me and my silly opinions, I'm Isaiah, ISAIAH _520, Isaiah. Don't forget the _520. And, of course, you can follow the O&B Puckcast at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck on Twitter. We have a Facebook page. We have a YouTube channel. And, of course, we're part of FlyersNittyGritty.com. Check out their content. Sometimes I retweet it with my own opinion. That's kind of amusing sometimes. And, of course, if you could rate and subscribe the O&B Puckcast, well, especially on Apple Podcast, it moves us up the charts. Of course, there's no charge, but when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcasts, it really helps us out. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. We're going to have a show coming up this Monday with a first-time guest to wrap up the trade deadline. And, dude, the Flyers have to do something to send a signal. That's what I'm looking for. It's the last thing, Jim, tonight. I mean, to me, the one thing I got to see out of this trade deadline is an indication that the Flyers are turning the page and are going to do something different going forward.
I hope so, man. It feels like you're setting yourself up for disappointment. And I've tried to stop doing that because I just don't trust that they're going to do things anymore. But yeah, hopefully we see something. I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer, so let's look forward to hopefully something fun.
Well, I got my fingers crossed. That's all I want. I don't need any big acquisition, but something that kind of says, hey, things are changing. Stay tuned.
Okay.
And with that, we'll leave it there. All right, everybody. Until next time, take care.